back on. I apologize for those joining us virtually. I know you were offline for about a minute, but we did not continue without you. We stopped, and I think we got the technology going again. Put something in the chat if it's going for you. It's going. Okay. All right. So the Cyrus cylinder. This is what was written, etched into the Cyrus cylinder, which mentions his coming into Babylon without any problems, with his freeing the people to go back and rebuild their temples and back to their lands. And this is not just on the Cyrus cylinder, but it's also in other ancient sources, histories by Herodotus, the Education of Cyrus by Xenophon, the Babylonian Chronicle, the Nabonidus cylinder. These are different indicators that this is what Nabonidus did, that this is what Cyrus did, that he allowed people to go back to the countries from which they were taken and to live there and to rebuild their temples. Why is this significant? Well, first, several significant points. One, the Cyrus cylinder affirms that Cyrus the Great lived and ruled in the 6th century, just as recorded in Scripture in 2nd Chronicles and Ezra and Daniel. Another real figure in history recorded in the Bible, affirmed by archaeology. Second, the contents on the Cyrus cylinder fulfill Isaiah's prophecy that an individual by the name of Cyrus would rise to power and conquer the previous empires. 100 years before it was prophesied. Third, the contents on the Cyrus cylinder fulfill Isaiah's prophecy that an individual by the name of Cyrus would allow the exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. That is what I just said, right? In the notes, I have that twice, don't I? So that's a duplicate. So you can cross out that. Okay, you're right. So 2 is conquer the previous empires. 3 is return Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Thank you. I thought I made a mistake and realized I did not make a mistake. Except that I made the mistake that I thought I made a mistake. Fourth, the events described on the Cyrus cylinder fulfill the prophecy of Jeremiah that after 70 years of captivity in Babylon, the Jewish people would be able to return to their land. Remember that? Daniel chapter 9, Daniel's old in age. He's nearing, and he's been in captivity for almost 70 years. He was probably taken as a teenager. He and the best and the brightest were taken from Israel and brought to Babylon. And as he's reading Jeremiah 25, the text says that he's reading in chapter 9, verse 1 of Daniel. Daniel chapter 9, verse 1. We read, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus of Median descent, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of the years which was revealed as the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So Daniel, as probably 80 years old by now, right? If he was a teenager, he's well into his 80s by the time he's reading this, and he's still reading Scripture, right? I want to be like Daniel. How about you? In my 80s, still studying, learning new things, and Daniel's reading the prophet Jeremiah and realizes Jeremiah 25 predicted that we would be in Babylon for 70 years. And now the 70 years are almost complete, and that leads Daniel to pray this long prayer of confession of sin on behalf of his people, and prayer for mercy and restoration to the land. And he knows he's not going back. He's too old to make that trip, but he wants his people to be able to return to Jerusalem. And you remember that an angel comes to him and says, before he finishes his prayer, before he's done praying, his Gabriel angel comes to him, and verse 20, now while I was speaking and praying, right, before he even stopped, the angel Gabriel came and expressed to him, said, good news. Good news is 70 years is up and you're going back to, your people will be able to get back. But the bad news is there's going to be 70 times 7 for the people of God because of continued disobedience and rebellion, right? Or 490 years, or sometimes called the 70th week of Daniel, right? And then Gabriel gives him this revelation about the 70th week. It's in this context of 70 years is complete. They've been in captivity for 70 years. Now they're going to be able to go back, but angel Gabriel says there's another 490 years, 70 times 7 for the people of God. And of course, 69 of those 70 years, or 69 of those 70s have been fulfilled. And we can't go into all that prophecy, but we've got one more 7-year period of time, right? That's known as the tribulation. Right? So prophecy is fulfilled literally and concretely. And this Cyrus cylinder points to the fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy in chapter 25, and Daniel's repeating of it and recognizing it in Daniel 9. Fifthly, and finally, the events described on the Cyrus cylinder affirm the historical record of 2nd Chronicles and Ezra regarding the return and rebuilding of the temple. So these events were prophesied about, and they are recorded on the Cyrus cylinder. All of this is incredibly faith-affirming, isn't it? And you can go and look at the Cyrus cylinder, guess where? The British Museum, yes. Go check it out. All right, our fourth and final discovery for the night is going to involve a Medo-Persian king, King Darius, or Persian king, King Darius. Not Darius the Mede, who came in and took over the Babylonian Empire. It's a different Darius, later Darius. But he is mentioned in Scripture. He's mentioned in Ezra 4 and 5. He's mentioned in Nehemiah. He's mentioned in Haggai and Zechariah. So 2 prophets and 2 historical books. This is a very important and influential king. Extra biblical sources inform us that Darius I became king after the death of a king by the name of Cambyses II. So Darius I, or Darius the Great, he's the one that allowed the continuation of the temple to be rebuilt after it was stopped. So Cyrus allowed it initially to be rebuilt. It was not completed, but the temple was reconstructed. It resumed in the 2nd year of Darius I's reign, or Darius the Great, not Darius the Mede. Right? Darius the Mede is the one that came and conquered Babylon. Darius I is a later king, and that's recorded in Ezra 4. Then the work on the house of God in Jerusalem ceased, and it was stopped until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. He's also mentioned in as the Persian king who investigated and confirmed Cyrus's earlier decree. So he looked into the records to see, yes, it is. Cyrus did allow the rebuilding, and that's one of the reasons Darius issued a decree to search for these archives, and he found them, and in that searching recognized that yes, Cyrus had allowed them to rebuild the temple, and so Darius allowed them to restart that building program. And then both Haggai and Zechariah ministered during Darius I's reign. Right? They're the prophets that were encouraging during this time, ministering to the people in the reconstruction effort. Haggai 1:1, in the 2nd year of Darius the king, on the 1st day of the 6th month, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Haggai. Then in Zechariah 1:1, in the 8th month of the 2nd year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to Zechariah the prophet. Right? And so Darius is mentioned in 2 of the prophetic books as well as the historical books. Well, what is the Bayestan relief, and how does it relate to Darius the Great. By the way, I won't go down that rabbit trail. All right. The Bayeston inscription is named after a village near where it's located. And that village is between Baghdad, Iraq, and Tehran, Iran, right in the thick of things as the conflict goes on as we record this session. And wars continue in this land, as was mentioned, right? Have never ceased to have battles in this land. The discovery of the Bayeston relief, it was discovered by Henry Rawlinson. Remember, he's the one that was able to decipher the Nabonidus cylinder, the one that Taylor had discovered. He's the one that's deciphering it. He was there from 1835 to 1837 as an army officer for the British, actually called the British India Company, which was a trading company backed by the British government. So this was a private army to protect the trading British East India Company. And during this time, Rawlinson became very interested in this relief. He saw it. But the problem was, it's 330 feet above the road below. And so this relief and accompanying inscription, I showed you the zoomed up version, but this is the zoomed out version. The relief and accompanying inscription were etched high above, 330 feet above the road leading to the ancient city, ancient city there.
How did it get up there?
Well, that's why it's still there. That's why it wasn't destroyed over the years by the Muslims who don't like anything that's iconic, right? There's a God up there that would have been destroyed had it been at the lower level. And that's probably why it was built so high up, so that no one could deface it or destroy it. So you can see the inscriptions there. You can see the different people taken into captivity. And you can see Darius there with his hand upward and his foot on top of a person that's begging for mercy. So the discovery, the time which, this is Rawlinson, and this is a record of a memoir written by Rawlinson's younger brother. And his younger brother writes, the time which he could spare from his public duties was chiefly occupied in transcribing with the utmost care so much of the great inscription as he found at that time, with the appliances which he possessed. So he didn't have all the gear that he needed to get up there and see and try to get a close examination. The task was dangerous as Rawlinson climbed up and down the bare and slippery rock 3 or 4 times a day for many days together, without the aid of a rope or ladder, without any assistance, in fact, whatever. So he's younger at this time. This is 1835 to 37. And again, this is the memoir of his brother's record. And so he would have climbed all the way up there. But then he goes back in 1844, a few years later, bent on extorting from the reluctant rock something more nearly approaching to a full account than it had as yet given of the treasures that were in its keeping. It continues that Darius took extraordinary pains to ensure the permanency of his record is evident by its position. Instead of being placed on a level with the spectator, where it would be subject to injury and disfigurement, it has been engraved at an elevation about 300 feet from the base of the rock. It continues, Darius could not have foreseen, of course, this iconoclastic passion of Islam. What's that mean? They hate anything and will defile, you remember ISIS, right? They destroyed anything that was iconic, anything that was an image of a god. Their passion of Islam, this iconoclastic passion of Islam, say that 3 times really fast. Yet, it can hardly be doubted that to the safeguard which he provided of an inaccessible position is to be alone attributed the preservation of the tablet from the fate that has befallen at the ruthless hands of the Arabs so many of the other antique monuments of Persia. Now, he's speaking of this in the 1840s, right? Imagine now, right? So things were being defaced even back then. And in 1847, he returns again. This time he brings with him ropes, ladders, nails, pegs, hammers, and wood planks to get up there. But he's too old at this point to get up there himself. And he enlists the help of a Kurdish boy. And that Kurdish boy nailed pegs into the cliff, attached ropes, and created a swing, a seat, so that he could get what's called a squeeze, right? Like paper mache of the inscription in its entirety. So the Kurdish boy was able to acquire it, and that's how we have a detailed inscription of it. And so again, it's way up there, 330 feet above the road. So what is it? So we see it's 49 feet wide. The entire picture and inscription is 49 feet wide. It's 82 feet high. And what does it include? It describes the inscription describes Darius's rise to power and his victories in warfare over Gaumata. It also chronicles revolts and reorganization of his empire. So this is, again, a chronicle, a detailed account of the most important events in Darius's reign. So you could see the picture from a distance. You couldn't read the inscription from a distance, from the road. So here is the relief in well, let me describe this. The life-size rendering of Darius, and he's standing with a bow in his hand, and in his left hand, and 1 foot on top of his enemy. The enemy's hands are raised, pleading for mercy. And here's a drawing of it to be more obvious. Again, his right hand is raised towards his God up and above, who is depicted as flying above the scene. And the God is honoring Darius and has given Darius this victory. The relief also includes 2 of Darius's soldiers behind him. You can see them there to his left, and then 9 of those captured enemies who are bound with their hands behind their backs and ropes around their necks. Then you have the inscription. The relief and accompanying inscription stresses how the kingdom was acquired by military force and given to Darius by his god, Ahura Mazda. And here is the writing. I slew his enemy there. I disposed him of his empire. By the grace of Ahura Mazda, I became king. Ahura Mazda granted me the scepter. So the significance here. Well, the inscription identifies Darius the First as a real historical king, just as the Bible states. Second, the inscription dates Darius's reign to the precise period recorded in Scripture. So not only do we have the right name, we have the right place and the right time. All of these match perfectly. And third, the inscription describes the establishment of satrapies, which matches the administrative structure found in the biblical text. So even the type of government and type of organization that he had fits perfectly with the biblical text. And there's one more significant detail, and that is, it's like the Rosetta Stone. You know what, the Rosetta Stone, it's not just a language software to learn new languages. They got that off of this, right? This is the Rosetta Stone. But the Rosetta Stone is also in, guess where? British Museum, yes. The Rosetta Stone had 3 languages on it. At the top, you have ancient Egyptian calligraphy, hieroglyphics, and then in the middle, you have ancient Egyptian, and then at the base, you have Greek. And so this allowed, because it's the same text in all 3, it allowed them to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphics. And so that the Greek at the bottom helped them to decipher what the hieroglyphics at the top was. Here's the hieroglyphics at the top. And the Bayeston inscription did for hieroglyphics, for cuneiform text, what the Rosetta Stone did for hieroglyphics. It was able to crack the code, understand the language of the cuneiform script. That brings us to a close today. We've looked at the Nabonidus Cylinder and Nabonidus Chronicle, both that affirm Belshazzar, real person, real event, and why he gave Daniel 3rd place in power. We looked at the Cyrus Cylinder, again, that affirms a lot of details of the biblical text, including the fulfillment of Isaiah the prophet, prophecy in Isaiah, and recorded in Daniel's a recollection of that prophecy in Jeremiah 25. Then finally, Darius the Great is also a real person at a real time, at the right time, in the right place on this Bayeston inscription. All right, next week we're going to look at the Persepolis Palace, which is another exciting discovery, the silver bowl of Artaxerxes, and a bunch of seals of different biblical characters, biblical kings. But we're going to look at the king of the time of Esther. Right? So come back next week, and we'll talk about that king that's affirmed by biblical archaeology. Thank you so much.
I have a question. Is there significance to the use of cylinders over